Hello and welcome to A Bag of Cthulhu. Once again, we're going behind the bar with an in-depth conversation with A Bag of Snails. And no, I don't mean that literally, I mean the pseudonym of A Bag of Snails. Snails, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Bag of Snails. I just go by Snails. I'm producer slash creature designer slash game designer and writer for Cthulhu Dreamt, and I'm happy to be here today.
And we're happy to have you. Jay, would you like to kick off with our very first question? It tends to be a ball breaker.
Now, the first question is just, what do you think a Cthulhu would be as a pint? If you were to make a Cthulhu cocktail, a Cthulhu drink, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. My gut reaction is a dark stout for Cthulhu, because I feel like there's a lot to the mythos these days, because there's so many authors adding in their own takes and their own interesting interpretations of what Cthulhu is. I think something like dark that you can really kind of chew on with a lot of complex flavors. I think that would be the ideal Cthulhu drink for me.
Damn, that's in depth.
My base answer always ends up being absinthe.
You know what? That's very fair.
I tend to go for a mead.
You're a sitcom mead at the moment, though, Matt.
Yeah. So, tell us a bit about yourself, your kind of like your inspirations for what you do, bit of your day-to-day, if you will.
Sure, absolutely. I'm actually terrible at this question, because the things about myself that I find interesting are quite boring, and the things that other people find interesting about me, I think, are very boring. So, I would have to say I draw a lot of inspiration from my life, for like eldritch horror and like just kind of creature and monster design in general. Just because I am fascinated by things that do not appear as they are. So anytime I can take something and subvert it into the unexpected, I'm very fascinated by that. And a lot of that comes from my own like life experiences and just thinking things are one way and then discovering that, oh no, they are not that way. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think, for example, that like discovering Santa Claus isn't real would be a source of inspiration for like cosmic horror. But in a weird way it can be, because that emotion, that moment of like realizing nothing is what you think that it is something I try and capture in a lot of what I do, in Cthulhu Dreamt or not.
Makes sense. You never really think about it, but for a kid, that's just discovering that everyone's been in a secret conspiracy to lie to you your whole life.
Exactly, right? It's also the moment you discover that, like, magic isn't real, right? Because magic's the only way that it makes sense that Santa Claus can just, like, deliver everything. So, like, discovering that, like, oh, the world isn't the way that I thought that it was. I had all of these concrete beliefs, and now I've discovered that everything is 100% different. I mean, it screams Cthulhu to me.
There's a lot of things we do to kids that would send an adult absolutely bonkers as well.
It's true. It's interesting, because a lot of the lies that we tell children or ourselves, I think, are ripe for being translated into a more corporeal form in the form of video games and TTRPGs. So one of my favorite things to do is to like think of those moments and then try and figure out how I turn it into a creature. And I'd have to say that that's probably my favorite thing that I do on like a day-to-day basis.
Wow. So what exactly is it that you do at Action Fiction?
Oh Lord. I've started using the moniker of producer, because it really does describe what I do, in that, like, my job is to get things done. If we have an idea or we have something that we want to have happen, like, I figure it out. I may not necessarily do the thing. I may delegate it to somebody else, but like I make sure it gets done. So a great example is we're working on a comic book for Cthulhu Dreamt. And like I didn't do the art for it and I didn't write the story, but I developed the plot for it. I found the author, I found the artist, and like I'm making sure that like the artist has what they need to get things done. The author had everything they needed to get done. I make sure that it stays consistent with the tone and the overall narrative of everything else. So I kind of have my job is to have my hands in as many pies as possible and make sure they all taste, if not the same, similar.
Yeah, I had noticed that. I've seen a couple of like TTRPG Kickstarters, and what struck me with a lot of them was that the arts might be nice, but some of them are really inconsistent, like completely different styles, completely different qualities all around the place. And Cthulhu Dreamt is not like that. It's all the same page. It's all very cohesive.
Yes, that my first gig for Action Fiction was as a writer for their Monsters of America content for restaurants and retail. And through that, I wound up becoming the art director for that book as well. And one of the big things that we wanted was to make sure that the art was as consistent as possible. And so I took what I learned there into my next couple of projects, Cryptid Chronicles and Chromatic Gamut. And so I've been able to apply what I've learned from those projects into this one. And we spent, oh Lord, probably the first year of like production on Cthulhu Dreamt was, for me personally, was just figuring out what the art style was going to be and how to make it as consistent as possible. Even our more illustrated pieces that have color and stuff, like we have an in-book reason for like why they break away from the sketch, but they still keep kind of like the same overall vibe of things, right? And for me, that's always been very important, even when I was first starting out, is because I did notice that same thing, where it was a lot of TTRPG Kickstarters, they get a bunch of artists and they have them do their thing, and that's fine. It's a totally fine way of doing things. But when you look at like the big names like WotC or Paizo, or even Monty Cook, and like the stuff that he does, it's all so consistent throughout. It tells a narrative. And that's one of the things that I noticed in kind of looking at those books is like the narratives that they would tell in different pages. Like if you open up your D&D player's handbook to like the barbarian class, for example, like that image, it tells a story, and so does every single class artwork thing. They all tell a story, and when you take them all together, you kind of get like an overall idea of kind of what the world of Dungeons and Dragons is like. And so I really, really wanted to make sure that we brought that level of quality into Cthulhu Dreamt, so that way all of the art tells a story, and as you're kind of like going through and looking at it, you get an idea of what the world is like through the eyes of these people.
Well, I'd say it definitely succeeded with keeping it all kind of neat and together.
Yeah, the art style, I must admit, is amazing. It does have that very eldritch and mysterious look to it, and yet everything flows so nicely from what we can see so far.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It means all the work that I spent getting the style consistent was very worth it. It was an interesting challenge for sure, because we already had an art style for America. Getting to develop one from the ground up was a challenge, but a fun one.
Did you have any specific inspirations as far as what you were going for with the art, other than Lovecraft himself?
Yeah, actually. I wanted to incorporate certain elements of like Junji Ito, which obviously, like, we are not an anime styled book at all, but he has a certain quality to his line work, as well as like how detailed he gets with his creatures that I wanted to incorporate. There are also just like scientific journals in general. When I was a lot younger, I saw a documentary on Shackleton and like his like journey across, trying to cross the Arctic. And like some of the notes that he took there, as well as other like old explorers who like were charting waters and like seeing new things for the first time. Charles Darwin, weirdly, was something of an inspiration, just because of like the different like sketches that he took. And then like more contemporary, for like aesthetic, there was a lot of inspiration from like Starship Troopers and
It's a good film.
oh, excellent film. And even though I haven't seen the franchise, I've always appreciated the art in Aliens, like the Aliens franchise.
Wait, you haven't seen those?
I have only seen one film. I have seen Aliens Resurrection, and I've seen it 4 or 5 times, against my will. But I've heard wonderful things. I've got a group of friends, and we're trying to get together so that way we can sit down and we can watch like the first 2 Aliens films. Because like how can I continue going on without actually like watching one of the greats of horror?
I will say that with the first one, it kind of has had a bit of a Jaws effect where you can tell it was meant to be horror, and it still kind of comes across like that, but you know, it has aged.
That's one of the things that I'm very much looking forward to, actually, is seeing like it's like when you watch The Thing or It, like the older versions of those films, seeing like something that was scary in the like the public conscience for so long that isn't necessarily scary by our standards now, and trying to put yourself in that headspace where like it is scary is a lot of fun to me. So I am looking forward to that part of it as well. Also because there's so much practical effects, and I'm a practical effects geek when it comes to films.
Yeah. I think drawing from, I'm going to probably mispronounce it, Junji Ito. From him is really great as an idea for this type of game. Because if you look at his stuff, yeah, it's horror, but it's taking something that should be comical because it's so weird, like that one he did with the shark with the spider legs.
yes.
But reading it as horror that balances really well between like the whole Lovecraftian, serious, eldritch, and the comedy that a TTRPG can quickly dissolve into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I firmly believe, and I've said it before, that comedy and horror are 2 sides of the same coin, because what makes something funny is the same thing that makes something scary, and that's the subversion of expectations, right? So in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of extremes. Like something going too far can be funny, or it can be scary. Yes, I think that's one of the things that I love about Ito's work. Uzumaki in particular, there's a lot of scenes where when you try and pull away from it, it's like it's funny to think about everything turning into spirals, and like all of these people like having these weird things happening to them. But when you zoom in and you look closer at like what he's done with his artwork, it gets more and more terrifying. And that's another thing that I really try to bring into the art for Cthulhu Dreamt. Was at a glance it's fine, but the more you look at it, the more uncomfortable you get, and that's a fine line to walk, because as we were like discussing how to design the book, I'm talking with Jaren and Reed, the other co-leads on the project, and it's like I want people to be uncomfortable when they look at the book, but I don't want the book to be hard to read. So, because you need, as the facilitator, for example, you need to be able to sit down and read the monster stat blocks and the lore and all of that jazz. And as the player, you need to be able to sit down and read, like, how you make your character and what your options are. But at the same time, I still don't want it to be a boring, dry experience. Like, it should be a little kind of creepy to make your character, in my mind. And we're still nailing that balance down. But I think we're getting close.
I must admit I had to Google who you guys were talking about because I had no idea just then. So, what I'm going to ask you is, out of everything, what would you say is your kind of favourite thing about this project, and what also is your least kind of favourite thing?
Favorite thing? I think so far my favorite thing has been seeing the comic book come to life, because ever since I was a kid, I wanted to work in comics. I when like my mother got me a how to draw Marvel superheroes book when I was like really young, and then like a drawing table when I was a little bit older, because I loved comic books. Didn't have a lot of money for them, so I would read them until they would fall apart. So that one's like a bit of a bucket list item for me. So that one would probably be my favorite. My least favorite would probably be all of the math that I have to do for the ARG, which I'm also in charge of. So
I have been following that.
I love the ARG. I think it's really cool, but encoding messages and like developing new codes and ciphers is a lot of fun until you have to do math, and then it's a little bit less fun. But I still really enjoy it. But that would probably be my least favorite thing, is the math.
I take it you encoded the YouTube URL.
Yeah. Everything to do with the ARG I've done. So, with the exception of the videos on Fable Factory, Reed handles our musical ciphers, and like our fancy videos, and then everything else is me.
There's a lot of fun to be had with kind of like the mystery, the hidden elements kind of deal with Lovecraft's work, Cthulhu-inspired stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I will admit, one of the first things we ran into was kind of like the worst side of playing a game based off of Cthulhu, because we were doing Call of Cthulhu as our first game on the podcast, and I think the first one we ran into was like based in an asylum, and it came before the kind of not great things Lovecraft wrote about baked into the game.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Is divorcing some of the less savory opinions of the creator from the content itself. But I think a lot of the newer authors, and like even some of the older authors who are kind of like some of their newer work, is getting better at kind of like taking some of those problematic themes out, right? Because when we look at his work, I mean, I'm just gonna say it, like, he's a racist, right? So
have you ever looked up his cat's name?
Exactly. So
yes, definitely.
He's racist, he's ableist, he has not great opinions about people who are different than him, and he's not very smart. Like, when we look at Lovecraft, and like one of my favorite stories is The Color Out of Space, because I love the idea of just like looking at something being like enough to infect you. But like the science behind the thing is not it's not super great. So it's that is something that like in our project that we're really working to avoid, is kind of falling into some of those pitfalls of working within the genre, and like having a problematic creator as like the source of inspiration. So it's part of why like we don't have a built-in madness system for the game, but we do have mental stress as like a thing. So like we had a long conversation about like, do we include madness? Like, every Cthulhu game includes madness and sanity and all this stuff, and we just came up with a decision that this is not the place to have that conversation. What we want is for people to go on a journey and experience like wonderful and terrifying things, and like get scared, obviously, but also like question, like really like come down and like experience stuff that makes them question like preconceptions, and incorporating a system of like going insane, and doing it in such a way that is sensitive to affected communities, and educated, and not like just full of harmful stereotypes, is incredibly difficult. Like a very difficult undertaking, and not really like the place to do it in this book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of Lovecraft's work is like very obviously mired in some not great stuff. There's a lot of it that you don't need to go looking. It's in front of you. It's right there. But one of the things that's a theme that's prevalent through his work, I'm not entirely sure how you would work around, is that whole, how do I say it, that kind of general theme in his work where intermixing different races is, like, that's half his monster manual, so to put it.
Oh, yeah. Yes, so the short version of that is we don't really have that in as a theme. We have one of the unlockable specialties that you can play as is, for when our Kickstarter comes back, is the experiment, which is somebody who has been changed and altered by eldritch forces in such a way that, like, you now begin to kind of somewhat question, like, where does humanity end, and where does like monstrosity or the other begin. But like, that's probably as close as we get to like the intermixing of things. We do have the brainchild, but they're more of like an invasive parasite than like any kind of mixing or whatnot.
Yeah, and I saw from on the Kickstarter that you are going to switch it, like, what is it, condemn things like mega corporations and stuff. I think that's really neat to kind of switch where the general focus is on Lovecraft stuff somewhere a bit more relevant in the modern day.
Absolutely. When we were designing Salient Wealth, one of the things that we wanted to try and keep in mind is, like, we were like, when we're thinking about them, we try and think of them as like Amazon but more evil. So, like,
you can do that?
Listen, it was a stretch, but I think we managed to make it work.
Excited to see it then.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So, going back to more kind of game-based things, do you have favorite RPGs, tabletop RPGs that you've played that you've kind of also used as inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little weird because for this project specifically, because it's a unique system, and one that was developed in-house. In a lot of ways in the design, I tried to take anti-inspiration, if that makes sense. I looked at, like, Dungeons & Dragons, for example, is the TTRPG that got me into TTRPGs. I started back in 3rd edition in high school, and I've played every edition since. And, like, let's see, Pathfinder, I played a little bit of that, and I really enjoyed it. I've played, a couple dozen different indie games. Actually, one that I really enjoy, that I shout out every time I get the opportunity, is Legend of Zelda Reclaim the Wild. It's a fan-made Legend of Zelda TTRPG that's kind of in the vein of Breath of the Wild, and it's so much fun, and like really captures like the video game experience of like running around and crafting and exploring. And I felt like they did a great job with that, and so that one definitely stands up as a favorite. Also, like Automata, a Game of Automated Fear, is another tiny little indie game that I thought was great because it's the only TTRPG I've played where the dungeon master or the game master is actually the opponent of the players. And so, like, you're telling a narrative story, but you're also trying to defeat the players in kind of like a game, because the whole theme is robots are replacing everybody, and so you're trying to replace the players with your robots. To like kind of continue a conspiracy. But in taking my inspiration from those places, I tried to do what none of them do in my design elements, which is impossible to do perfectly. So there's definitely places where things bleed through, like, but I would say especially in the monster design, you definitely see a bigger difference in how we approach monsters than you'll see in things like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. The player is a lot more involved in the action. So we have, for example, the Parasite, and that's SIGHT, is a massive flying monster that one of our like larger creatures that you can kind of run into. And if you decide
Please
to fight
tell me it's covered in eyeballs.
it has no eyes.
Oh, what twist?
Yes. So when you're fighting it, you'll discover that it's if you decide to fight it, that is, it's very difficult to like land blows and all these other things. And the reason that is because the player is meant to close their eyes when they go to like roll their dice. Yes, spoilers. So the it's very easy to figure out. Like that this is probably like our easiest one. Like our you won't see this one in the actual plays yet, because we're still designing it for like the mechanics for online games. But like the player has to do something physical in order to actually influence the fight and kind of figure it out. So all of our creatures we try and design around the player being actively involved in the combat or the puzzle or the obstacle it is that they have to overcome.
That's definitely a unique take on it. How would that translate so much to digital play though? If it's the players physically doing stuff.
Yeah.
That is the challenge that we're currently trying to overcome. So for the parasite as our example, we are currently playing with having someone else roll for the person. We also have a couple of other things that we're testing out, just to make sure that they're fun. Because like we want to do something different and interesting, but we also want to make sure that like it's fun. So it doesn't matter if your game, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if your game is like unique or different. If nobody enjoys playing it, then it's not a very good game, is it?
Yeah, fair enough.
I've seen in the Kickstarter and a few other things, you have this game set up that if someone does decide on the day they can't join, you can go down a completely different tangent. How is it that you've managed to come up and work that into one story? So,
I think that one was really just born from the frustration that we all feel of trying to schedule a D&D game. And just sitting and brainstorming and thinking about, like, is there anything that we can do about that? Like, because Cthulhu Dreamt is a curated experience, somebody being missing from the party could drastically affect the way that you experience your playthrough. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where like, oh, well, the healer isn't here today, so it'll be a little bit tougher, but we'll be fine. It's like, well, no, if you're down your wrecker, for example, like there's entire pathways that might be closed off to you because you don't have that person. So trying to find a solution for that is where the side stories really kind of spawned from. And the idea of the side stories is that you can, if somebody is missing, you can just play a game, like an entirely like one-shot, isolated narrative with pre-generated characters where you get to explore an entirely different aspect of the world of Cthulhu Dreamt. So for the main narrative, you're just regular people. And like you'll create your characters and all that. But for a side story, you might be edge troopers, like these kind of super soldiers with like the latest and greatest technology, like fighting traces that are beyond human comprehension. Or you might be the police in another city trying to calm a riot and not really understanding what's going on. Or you could be researchers in the Antarctic with something like trying to knock down the doors and figure out what's happening. And No, please go ahead.
I think having such a great opportunity for one shots is really nice because again, scheduling's hard. I know you were thinking of adding more side quests if you reach them as stretch goals. Are there any stretch goals in particular that you're super hyped about?
Yeah. So, the stretch goal I'm the most excited for is pretty far down the way, but it is we print the comic book in physical format. And then anybody who backs at a certain tier gets a copy of it, or it becomes an add-on. I'm not sure which we have. I'd have to double check that information. So being able to like hold a comic book in my hand that I helped make, I think would be really dope.
That would be one hell of an achievement.
Oh yeah, I've already with Chromatic Gamut, I managed to mark one bucket list item off of my list, and that was developing a coffee brand. So if I can go 2 for 2 for projects, I'm going to be done doing good.
Hold up, you developed a coffee brand?
Yeah, we have. So Chromatic Gamut is our like take on New York City and queer culture and the LGBT, and so we, as a queer person myself, and my project lead on that one is also queer. We hired a team of entirely queer writers from all over the alphabet, if you will, and we completely designed New York City in our kind of like fantasy parody setting of America, from the ground up. And one of the things that we wanted to do was make an add-on that you could get that was coffee, because one of the funny, because it's true, stereotypes of queer people is that we are fueled by iced coffee and spite.
Oh yes, you cannot go into Starbucks without meeting at least 12 gay people.
It's so true. So it was kind of the perfect add-on, and I got to help design the brands, as well as do the taste testing for the coffee, and like determine like what it would taste like and what we were trying to go for. We wound up working with an incredible company called Smuggler's Coffee, and they did an incredible job. So we wound up making a great brew that is specifically designed for iced coffees.
That is something I noticed at the Kickstarter. There seems to be a lot of like add-ons that I haven't seen before in places. Like, yeah, it's usual to have a couple more art prints, whatever, but you guys are having like cassette tapes, vinyl records.
Very much on the retro side of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So because the origin of the Kickstarter is from like a band, and music is such a big part of the game and the entire experience, we wanted to have some stuff that appealed to audiophiles as well. So that's why we've got cassettes and vinyls. Some of the options that you can get, I learned a lot about vinyls, and and audio and stuff for this Kickstarter. Some of the vinyl stuff looks really cool, and I hope that we get to do that.
I was gonna say, I did see the vinyl, and I must admit that hooked me immediately. I'm not a vinyl collector, but the idea of that that is an incredible idea to have.
For me, it was the hoodie. It's the what was it, rainbow looking? Yeah, the cyan and purple Cthulhu design on the hoodie.
That kind of Celtic knot style Cthulhu is so good.
Yeah.
I definitely had one of those added onto my backer list. So, as we're on the kind of theme of Kickstarter again, is there any kind of future projects after Cthulhu Dreamt that are in the pipeline, or anything in the murmuring? I know obviously you're still developing Dreamt, as it were, but is there anything hinted at?
Oh yeah, we're pretty open. One of Action Fiction's big things, when we were forming as a company properly, is that we want to be as transparent as possible with people. And that's for several reasons. But not the least of which, we want people to be able to see what we're doing and then replicate it if they want to. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of mystery inside of this industry, and we kind of want to show that you can not shroud yourself in secrecy and still be successful. So the next Kickstarter that we have planned is for a board game called Goblin Cave. That's imagine League of Legends if it was actually fun.
That's a stretch.
I know.
It's not that bad.
It is incredibly bad.
Listen, I have several friends who play League. I used to play back when it was back in season 2. I don't know anybody who plays League that likes League.
Oh, so, for sure, yeah.
The original, I must admit, I liked.
That's the consensus.
Can't stand it now.
That's nostalgia talking, and you know it.
So Goblin Cave would be our next big thing, and that I'm very excited for that. That's like the other way that we describe it is like a hero shooter, but it's a board game. So I can't wait to like actually talk about it.
That's fair enough. There's a lot of hush hush I can understand.
It's not so much that there's hush hush. It's more that like I just don't have the information for you. If Jared was here, he could tell you a lot more about it. But that's one of the projects that I have not actually really been involved with. That's been going on for, oh Lord, is it almost 5 years now?
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it started off, I do know the origin of it, which is that it started off as like basically just a little game on a whiteboard in Adam Buffoni's like basement garage or whatever. And then they turned it into like a really janky game you could play on Roll20. And it just kind of evolved from there. And it was so much fun that it just kept growing and growing and growing. And now we've got like, I'm pretty sure on what is that, Tabletop Simulator, we still have the mod out where you can download the playtest game, and we've got like little models for all of the characters, and I think it's wild to see it grow. That one is especially weird because it's almost done. So it's basically waiting in the wings for Cthulhu Dreamt to finish up, and then it's pretty much ready to go to Kickstarter.
You said you had a janky version on Roll20. I may have to see if we can acquire that.
I'll see if it's something that's available for download, and I'll get back to you on that one.
No, it's much appreciated. I suppose the only kind of other thing we really have to ask is, at what point were you involved with the company in the kind of like the founding, as it were?
Yeah. So the company was founded by Jaron, R.M. Johnson, Brad, S.V. Richards, and then CJ, whose last name escapes me. So the three of them really, they started the company together with the first Monsters of Merca book and that Kickstarter. And then I came in as a writer on Restaurants and Retail, and then became the art director by accident. And then after that Kickstarter wrapped, there were several people who had kind of become integral to making the company run, and so we reformed as Action Fiction, and now there's like, I want to say 9 people who are all kind of part of this. We're basically a co-op. We're all as far as like weight and opinion and stuff goes, we're all equal partners.
That's a fair one. Jay, do you want to end it up with the final?
Yeah, sure. So just might as well let people know where they can find you, like the Discord and stuff.
Oh yeah, you can find me at Bag of Snails on Twitter. You can find Action Fiction at Action Fiction on Twitter. We have links to our Discord there. The Discord is probably the best place to find us, and like because we're more active there, and you can see whatever project it is that we're working on, and occasionally see the chaos that is our community.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time so far, Snails. We look very much forward to the 15th, and I believe that's all.
Awesome, thank
Do
you.
you think you would like to close out on?
Nothing that I can think of other than it was a pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.